What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Danny and Bush coming at you with our draft strategy from picks 5 to 8. So if you guys didn't see the video yesterday, we did our early round draft strategy for picks 1 to 4. If you are picking 101, 102, 103, 104 in your fantasy drafts this year, I highly encourage you to go check out that video. Today, we're going to be tackling the middle round picks, or the middle of the draft picks, 5, 6, 7, and 8. We're going to be going into basically some theory, some draft strategy that we've seen based on the hundreds of mock drafts and underdog drafts that we've done so far this offseason. And then we're going to go into some drafts where we're picking 5, 6, 7, and 8 and talk about our process through the first 8 rounds or so. So, Danny, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. And yeah, again, most of you aren't going to be lucky in getting those 1 to 4 picks in your draft. So being able to understand and get a feel of how to attack your drafts at really any position you are on the board gives you a significant advantage over your league. Again, a lot of people are going to be going to the draft focusing on that micro player v player analysis and panicking once their player goes. If you're well equipped and ready to attack the board, once you know and see the tier values drop to you on a round-to-round basis, depending on where you pick, that's how you get into it. Again, a lot more of a macro type feel of this video. I know I mentioned that probably a zillion times in the first video, but that is the general basis of these videos. Understanding it not from that confined perspective, but understanding the general viewpoint of how to attack within tiers and how to set yourself up through the rest of your draft based on those first few rounds of your draft. Because again, we can mention our late round sleepers every freaking time, but structurally being able to perfect your first 3 rounds is how you set yourself up for the rest of the draft. So I'm excited. And again, these are some of my favorite videos.
Yeah, for sure. So if you guys enjoyed this video at any point, I encourage you to hit the like button. You can go ahead and do it right now. It's totally free to do, and it helps us out. Comment any of your thoughts down below. Who you should go with at each part in the draft. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We're growing every day. We're hoping to get to 5,000 subscribers by the end of this week. So if you haven't already subscribed, please go ahead and do so. As I mentioned, it is free to do, and it helps us out tremendously. So we're going to hit the intro, and then we're going to get right into this. As far as draft strategy, yesterday you guys heard us go into an entire basically argument about a hero RB, which is basically where you take one anchor running back and then you would fill out your wide receiver, tight end, quarterback positions in the middle rounds, the 2nd to 7th round or so. And then you would swing back around to get your RB2. And the reason we talked about that in yesterday's video is because those top 4 picks give you the opportunity to get an anchor running back like Christian McCaffrey, like Alvin Kamara, like Dalvin Cook. When you're picking 5 to 8, I would call the strategy that I'm taking as at pick 5 to 8 as the mercy of the draft board strategy, basically, because this is, I believe, the worst spot to draft from. If you guys are curious, what's the best spot to draft from? We think it's 1 to 4, 1 to 3 specifically. But in my opinion, this is the worst spot to draft from because you're missing out on that elite talent at the top of the board. And you're also missing out on the chance to be closer to that turn if you wanted to pair 2 great running backs or 2 great wide receivers at the end of the round. So in my opinion, it is more of a micro type feel for how you want to approach your draft and the strategy that you're going to take.
Yeah, and again, for the most part, if you're in any type of PPR format specifically, everybody knows what the first 3 picks are going to be. You got your McCaffrey, you got your Cook, you got your Kamara. The problem with is that after those guys, rankings are going to vary across the board. And me personally, I mean, I've constantly debated players in this quote unquote 2nd to 3rd tier of drafts on how I want to attack it. But because there's not a concrete way to go about it, it makes this spot the most difficult. Again, we'll talk about in the late round how I kind of personally prefer and how I actually did it in my home league with the 110. But in this mid round, again, you mentioned mercy of the draft board is the perfect way to describe it. If you want to go 0 RB, if you want to go hero RB, if you want to go bimodal RB, which basically means taking 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds and not worrying about the position after that, all strategies are viable. Again, it depends what type of player you are taking at each spot and how you feel about them in terms of both their ceiling and overall fantasy football outlook going to the year. So yeah, I don't like the 5 to 8 at all whatsoever. And if you're picking your draft spot, these should be the bottom 4 picks that you would want to take.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. So we're going to start by going into a mock draft as we did yesterday. I'm going to be picking from the 5 slot. Danny's going to be picking from the 8 slot, and we're going to discuss our strategy, who we think is going to be available at this pick. Whether, I know we got some comments about this yesterday, who we pick is not really important. This is more of a strategy video than it is player analysis video. So if you guys would pick Derrick Henry over Saquon Barkley at the 105, then that's fine. You can employ the same strategy whether I pick that guy or not. It's basically about team construction and the strategy that we're approaching. So let's head into the draft.
Okay, so we have this draft set up again, similar to yesterday's video. We're going to go 8 rounds deep, just to kind of show you the basics again. You guys would have seen our late round values video already by now if you haven't done so recently on the channel. But yeah, we'll go through this first 8 rounds, kind of show you how the team can set up. Corey drafting from the 5 spot, myself drafting from the 8. So let's get into it. And if I see any crazy pick go off the board, I'll adjust it. Like, you're not getting KAMARA there, so I can quickly switch that real quick. I think this is a more reasonable board that you might expect in terms of texture at the 5 spot.
Right. And of course, Danny just made that adjustment because that's what we expect to happen. Of course, if KAMARA or Cook does fall to you at 5, then that is an obvious smash pick. But we are going to approach this with the kind of worst case scenario lenses so that if the best case scenario doesn't happen to you, then you know and you're prepared for the worst. That's basically what I would suggest you do. When you're doing mock drafts, if you're consistently getting teams that are unrealistic, in your opinion, know your league, know how they're going to draft, and make kind of adjustments accordingly. So I think this is a typical draft that you're going to see. Maybe Saquon Barkley is Derrick Henry. I think that's probably the most typical format that you're going to see. So you're probably going to be faced at running back with a decision between Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, Zeke Elliott, Jonathan Taylor, whoever, or you could go and opt for a wide receiver in Davante Adams, or you could even go with Travis Kelce as high as this pick. So the way I would approach this, the way that my rankings are currently set up, is Saquon Barkley is my 4th overall player. So this is exactly how my top 4 reads, essentially. These are the top 4 players on my board. They're all gone. So my 5th overall player is this is a half PPR format that we're doing this in, is Davante Adams. And that is the direction I will go with the 5 spot. Again, I wouldn't blame you for going with a Derrick Henry there. I wouldn't blame you for going with Travis Kelce there. Any other kind of direction that you could go. But Davante Adams is my highest ranked player. So that would be the direction I would go with the 5 pick.
For sure. And after that, we do see Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry go off the board, which you should expect in your home leagues. Those are more, well-profiled runners from an NFL basis. Just guys that I personally am avoiding because of the PPR aspect of fantasy football, unfortunately. But I'm on the clock here, and I was dead set on, I'm going to get Tyreek Hill or I'm going to get Travis Kelce. But Ezekiel Elliott's actually my 4th ranked player. And the reason why I personally view him as that guy that's well worth taking at the 104, well worth taking at the 105 is people want to associate Zeke with this rushing leader. But we did see a good amount of PPR and scoring upside in that Cowboys offense last year. Again, not too much microanalysis. You guys would have already seen our running back rankings video by now, but Ezekiel Elliott, I do think as would be a viable pick. If he hypothetically were to have gone off at that 106 instead of Nick Chubb, I would have went with Tyreek Hill. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, I totally think that's a fair strategy. And 108 is more so the range that I have Zeke Elliott ranked. Currently, you have him a lot higher than I do, but I still probably would consider him at that range of the draft, whether it be Tyreek Hill or Ezekiel Elliott. So now coming back around the board, you guys can see we saw a bit of a wide receiver run towards the end of the first round, early second round. So this is going to push down some of the running backs. And again, we're, like I said at the beginning of the video, we're kind of at the mercy of the draft board in this spot of the draft. We don't exactly know what the value is going to line up to be. I picked my best overall player at 5. You picked your best overall player at 8. We're not picking a running back or a wide receiver because they're running backs or wide receivers. We're picking the best available players and hoping that value kind of just continues to slide to us, which is unfortunately why we're not the biggest fans of drafting in this range.
For sure. And I'm lucky on this board because a player that I am very happy with ended up falling. Again, if it's a full PPR, I would heavily consider the Hopkins and Ridley. But man, Antonio Gibson is way too tasty to pass up at the 205. And like I said, you can go hero, you can go zero. In this case, I am taking that 2 strong RB start, bimodal RB, if you want to call it. And I'm not going to touch a running back for the most part until at least round 7, round 8.
Right. Now we get to me on the board, and the doomsday scenario at running back has, kind of showed itself. My best available player currently at the running back position is DeAndre Swift. I think it's a little too early for DeAndre Swift in the early to mid second round that I'm in right now, or the mid second round that I'm in. Calvin Ridley is my highest ranked player currently off the board right now. So I'm going to take Calvin Ridley. He is currently my 14th overall player, 13th overall player in my overall rankings. So am I scared that I went RB or wide receiver? A little, because I don't have a running back to anchor my team now. And DeAndre Swift just was selected as well. So what I'm looking at across the board basically is how do I approach my draft knowing that I don't have an anchor running back? My approach is going to be pretty simple. I'm going to have to build high-end depth and high-end starters at the other positions because I am going to be disadvantaged at running back. If I select a David Montgomery right now, I'm going to be really behind the 8 ball by the rest of the teams that have high-end running backs. So what I should do, and what I think is very obvious to you probably, is get an advantage at another position, and that advantage is George Kittle. So I'm going to take George Kittle here, and I didn't approach this draft saying I'm going to go 0 RB. I approached this draft saying I'm going to take the best players on my board, and these are the 3 best players on my board for me.
Yeah, I absolutely love what you did there. Again, you have those 2 elite wide receiver ones anchoring your team, going full embrace on the RB0 would be getting that George Kittle, getting another advantage just at tight end. Another way you can do it, again, at this point, if RB value doesn't fall, you could also get an anchor quarterback later on, as we'll probably get into with the later picks. So I'm a big fan of what you did there. I think Devontae Adams is the clear one at the wide receiver position. And Calvin Ridley, we're talking about a guy in an offense that should be fluid, should be good, and has the potential to have 160, 170 targets. I think Calvin Ridley could have a similar season, maybe even more touchdowns to what Stephon Diggs did last year. So I absolutely love that pick for you. Now that I'm back on the clock, and there's a clear tier breakout wide receiver for me, CeeDee Lamb making it to me at the 308 is the clear pick. And starting running back with 2 elite anchors and still getting, in my opinion, a very high upside wide receiver one like CeeDee Lamb, I'm through the moon with that pick.
Right. Now, if you were a little concerned about with what I did, you don't want to go with George Kittle, you need to go with a running back, and you have George Kittle and you view them as a similar tier as James Robinson or David Montgomery, I don't hate you for going that way, but I personally see a difference between George Kittle, David Montgomery, and James Robinson. So that is the way that I went. If you guys are concerned that I went with no running backs, you could have absolutely taken David Montgomery or James Robinson there. Just want to make that clear.
Yep, I absolutely agree. And I didn't plan on going full Cowboys, but look, if Amari Cooper's going to fall here, like, call me biased. You guys see the jersey in the background, but I'm doing it.
Yep, I don't hate that move for sure. Now, I'm debating whether or not I want to take James Robinson here, because do I think he actually makes it here in your home league drafts? I think the news, if you are drafting this weekend, right? Saturday, Sunday, this weekend, this will be a big weekend for drafts. I think you should be able to get James Robinson in the 4th round, if I'm not mistaken. Like, it's kind of going to depend league to league, how people view the James Robinson situation. But I view James Robinson as ahead of Josh Jacobs, who went in the 3rd round, as ahead of Chris Carson and Miles Sanders, who went at the late 3rd round. So to me, he presents a value at running back, and he does anchor a running back for me, which is a big need for my team. So I will go with James Robinson here, just because I think it is a good value. Now, how realistic is me getting James Robinson at the 4.8? I'm not exactly sure if he's going to make it to that point in your home league drafts. He might be more of a mid to late 3rd round pick, maybe even an early 3rd round pick in some leagues. So if you can get James Robinson there, that's a great value. But if not, I probably would have opted for a Chris Godwin there at wide receiver.
Yeah, no, I fully agree there. If you believe in Robinson, I personally still have Henderson a bit higher. I just like the PPR aspect that I'm getting with Henderson. But again, that is close.
With the Sony Michel trade and the Darrell Henderson
that's fair.
Injury, I think I'm probably just going to take Darrell Henderson off my board. So if you guys, I guess we didn't put out any news saying that Sony Michel got traded to the Los Angeles Rams today. It really does nothing for me in terms of Sony Michel's value. What it does to me, though, is just take Darrell Henderson off my board. He's completely a dead zone running back, in my opinion. Kind of just a landmine that I'm going to avoid in drafts.
Yeah, that's fair. So yeah, you would be back on the clock here, kind of structuring your team. You do have a little bit of a quote unquote hero RB, if you will. Again, you kind of took him, James Robinson, as that, back end RB1 to kind of complement that wide receiver and tight end core you got going. So what are you thinking here at the 5.5?
Right. So I was hoping that Lamar Jackson would fall to me so that I could get an anchor quarterback as well to go with this kind of hero RB modified 0 RB approach that I'm going with. But as of right now, I am a little bit scared about Dak Prescott, to the point that I will take him a couple picks after Lamar Jackson and some of these other quarterbacks. So if Josh Allen was here, if Kyler Murray was here, I probably would have gone with them. But it represents a little bit of a tier break for me, knowing that Prescott is still dealing with some of those injuries that he has. So I'm going to go currently with my highest rated wide receiver, and that's DJ Moore. I know I picked him in the other video, but I mean, I can't just like deviate from my board because I picked him in the other video. So DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley, and Devontae Adams, having a 3 stack of wide receivers like that is definitely a big time advantage. And I think probably outside of Team 12, who has Hill, Diggs, and Julio, probably easily the best wide receiver core in the league.
For sure. And I'm going to risk it here. I typically would just smash Dak. No way about it. Wouldn't think twice. But I see Brandon AIYUK or T. Higgins as the pick here. And because these two teams here both have quarterbacks, they could potentially make it back to me on the round. I know it would be risky considering I'm so Dallas invested right now, but I think the risk reward factor would pay off if I'm able to get Brandon Ayuk or T. Higgins and still end up wrapping around with Dak falling to me. So I will make that pick. I think Brandon Ayuk is the best player on the board. I think he's going to have a breakout year, and that's kind of how I would structure it. And we'll see if the risk paid off here.
You hate to see it.
Unfortunate, but at the end of the day here, those are the type of decisions you have to make in your draft board. It's not the worst case scenario losing that stack because I still think the Cowboys are going to be a very good offense. So those are the draft day decisions you might make in your room. I feel like taking an Ayuk there was well worth that risk because I believe in the player. If you have players you believe in, if you like Odell Beckham, if you like Deontay Johnson in that spot, let's just say it wasn't even Brandon Ayuk. We could talk about it on a macro level. Take that wide receiver if you see that the two teams of the four that are around the turn already have their quarterbacks locked up. So that's kind of how I view it. Hopefully that helps you guys out. But I mentioned T. Higgins, Chase Claypool are both on the board. I have T. Higgins a couple spots higher right now. It is very close, but those are the clear two best players on the board. So I am going to add T. Higgins to the group.
Yep, good. And thank God Chase Claypool just fell to me. So Chase Claypool, I'm just going to glance at the other positions just to make sure I'm not missing anything. Chase Claypool is clearly my highest rated receiver right now. Aaron Rodgers, I do have Devontae Adams, so maybe at that 7-5 spot, I can get Aaron Rodgers on the way back. That would make for a decent stack with Adams and Rodgers. You definitely get pretty much the entire Green Bay passing game locked up with those two players. So I don't need to worry about tight end. I already have George Kittle. Running back we're in the heart of the running back dead zone right now with guys like Chase Edmonds. So I am not going to be looking at running back probably for the next round or two. I'm going to go with Chase Claypool here. Now, if this is a league, and we're assuming this is a league where I can start 4 wide receivers, I'd have in my 2 wide receiver slots, I'd have Devontae Adams, Calvin Ridley, and then I would have DJ Moore and Chase Claypool in my flexes most of the year, and James Robinson as my anchor RB1. Now, unfortunately, Aaron Rodgers went off the board the next pick after my pick, so that is kind of unfortunate. I was looking to pair Devontae Adams with Aaron Rodgers, so as of right now, I don't see a big enough discrepancy in the quarterbacks that's going to make me want to go in that direction. I like Tom Brady. I like Jalen Hurts. I like Ryan Tannehill, but I think I can get one of those guys on the way back, hopefully. So I'm not going to actually force a pick at quarterback there. So looking at the running back board, I think I'm actually going to opt for a running back here because Damian Harris with this Sony Michel news, to me, sees a big time upgrade because Ramondre Stevenson, yes, he's had a good preseason. He scored 4 touchdowns, but he's done it against guys that are going to be working at Burger King for the rest of their lives. So I'm not overly concerned with what Ramondre Stevenson has done in the preseason. What we care about in the preseason, as I've talked about before, is usage. And the usage we've seen out of Damian Harris, now that we remove Sony Michel from the equation, is feature back usage on the ground. Of course, James White's going to mix in on third downs, but if I can get a 220, 240 carry Damian Harris with a 10 plus rushing touchdown upside, with now it sounds like Mac Jones might be the starter, so that red zone opportunity is even greater for Damian Harris down there in the scoring areas. I'll take him as my RB2. Now, I do have a fragile running back situation. I don't have studs or anything, but my wide receivers and tight end should be able to make up for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I've mentioned I don't like going with too many running backs in the first 7 rounds of my draft, but an outlier here I do see a tier break is that Trey Sermon. Listen, Raheem Mostert, people are going to hype him up this year. He has 295 career touches as a 29-year-old running back. I do think in this situation, again, it's a micro analysis, Trey Sermon would be a tier break over the rest of the position. So as a result, I'm going to take Trey Sermon and probably not touch another running back to legitimately around 13, 14 when you're getting into the James White, Chuba Hubbard, Rashad Penny area. So I'm very comfortable with that type of start. And we can kind of outline the teams, outline the structure quickly after this quote unquote mock is done, so you guys can kind of see how everything aligned. But yeah, I'd be quote unquote back on the clock here. Can check tight end. I do like Robert Tonyan, but in this scenario, because every single team here, except for 2, basically have their tight ends locked up, and the fact that I do still like Tonyan and Higbee in this spot, I wouldn't just take a tight end to secure it. I would kind of hope that either of those guys made it around. So I would look actually at the wide receiver position where I do see a little bit of a tier here of Devonta, Will Fuller, which is close, and Corey Davis. I would opt for Devonta Smith in this spot because I kind of have the security with Lamb Cooper mixed with the upside of AIYUK Higgins, adding another upside shot of a guy that even as a rookie could command 110, 115 targets, I think would be viable here in the 8th round. So,
yeah, I was actually hoping Devontae Smith would make it back to me. So a little unfortunate there, but looking at the rest of the board here, I have some consideration to the quarterback position, but as Danny mentioned, the teams ahead of me, teams 1 to 4, all have quarterbacks, right? So there's absolutely no reason for me to take a quarterback here. I mean, if they take a quarterback, they're kind of just running it down. So I probably won't take a quarterback here. If we were to do 9, 10, 11 round, I would probably take a Ryan Tannehill with my next pick because I think he represents a tier break for me at the quarterback position. So I would probably go in that direction if we were continuing to do this mock draft. But as Danny mentioned, I'm going to get myself basically an upside swing at my wide receiver 5 position. I know this guy won't technically make it into my lineup in this kind of format, but players are going to bust, right? Wide receivers are going to bust. I can play matchups if I have all these great wide receivers. And like I said, I need my flex spots and my wide receiver spots to be the best in the entire league because I don't have great running backs. And I have a tight end who's going to be very great as well. So hopefully getting Will Fuller there would make it okay. Obviously, the rest of my draft, as Danny mentioned, I'd be looking to fill out my running back core with a mix of guys like Tony Pollard and Alex Madison, get an upside swing like that. And then I'd also maybe mix in a Nyheim Hines, J.D. McKissick in case I need some stability. And maybe also another upside swing like a Salvin Ahmed in the 15th round or something like that. So that's kind of how I would fill out my running back core. Once we get through rounds 9, 10, 11, 12, that's when I would probably start hammering running backs and like the two to three running backs in those kind of 4-round area.
Yeah, for sure. And from my team perspective, I got my 5 staple wide receivers. I'd probably add a little bit more depth, a little bit more upside on the end of the bench. Guy like Will Fuller would have been a perfect type of pick. But looking at the rest of the board, it's actually currently not available. So we can just kind of brainstorm it. Guys like Elijah Moore, Rashad Bateman, guys like that to kind of store on my bench while these guys cook in my lineup would be the type of play. Again, because I got 3 running backs in the first 7 rounds, listen, Corey mentioned the range of running backs, the Nyheim Hines, the James White, the Chuba Hubbard, guys like that to store on the end of my bench. Because from a theoretical perspective, I invested such high capital into the running back position that continuing to hammer and hammer and hammer it, listen, it's a lot of diminishing returns, baby. If you keep adding to a position that you're already set at, you're not going to get enough return from them. If you're adding your 4th, your 5th, your 6th running back within the first 12 rounds, what are they going to do for your lineup? Genuinely, are they going to get in your lineup? Because are you going to take Ezekiel Elliott out? Are you going to take Antonio Gibson out? That is how I view the running back position. It is the most fragile position for a reason. I want the fewest of them on my roster. And when you're talking about this, again, Corey, you mentioned quarterback, tight end. I would be looking from the tight end position, a guy like Tyler Higbee. If I miss on that range, I can kind of look to the later round guys like Jared Cook, Cole Kmet, guys like that. And at the quarterback position, again, you mentioned the tier, Ryan Tannehill, Jalen Hurts, guy like that. And if I miss on them, I would just pair Justin Fields and Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, exactly. We've talked about that strategy a number of times. So that was basically what we did. As I mentioned, I went kind of a hero RB with like James Robinson early. If you think James Robinson was kind of an unrealistic pick there, I could have went with a David Montgomery, James Robinson at the 3-5 and passed on the elite tight end and then grabbed a Chris Godwin at the 4-8. So a number of different ways that you could have gone there. But like we said, the underlying point to this draft strategy is that you're kind of at the mercy of the draft board. So picking the best available players is something that I kind of want to hammer home as much as possible because you're going to be tempted to take a running back at 105. You're going to be tempted to take a running back at 208. And if it's not the best play, if it's not the best player on the board in your personal opinion, or maybe you trust our opinion on that, then don't do it, because taking a Clyde Edwards-Helaire, taking a DeAndre Swift, a J.K. Dobbins over Calvin Ridley to me is a mistake, because I see Calvin Ridley as a potential wide receiver 1 overall in fantasy, and to pass on that for what I presume probably only has top 5, top 7 upside at most at the running back position is a mistake. So we got to hammer that point home. You're kind of at the mercy of the draft board. It's unfortunate, but that's what you're at with the picks 5 days. So we're going to swing into the next mock draft where we're going to be picking from 6 to 7.
Yeah, for sure. So Corey mentioned he picked from the 5 slot. I picked from the 8 slot last time. We're going to just switch it up. I'll pick from the 6. You pick from the 7. And yeah, it's going to be a weirder type of field of the draft. You guys kind of saw the 5 and 8 worked out. Probably the teams are going to look similar, but again, it's all mercy at the draft board, depending on what falls in terms of value. So let's start this draft. And if I see any unrealistic picks, yeah, like I'm switching that. I'll switch.
I think, I mean, the players that went off the board are fine, so you don't need to switch anything.
That's fair.
I would say. Okay. Like, the order's a little janky, but like the players that went off the board, I think is very realistic.
Yeah, for sure. And you took Devontae Adams last time. Well, Ezekiel Elliott went. That would be my highest player because he is gone, or highest player if Devontae Adams, or he would have been my highest player had he fallen. But because he is gone, Devontae Adams is currently my 5th overall player ranked. So I will take him. I'm fine with that type of pick, getting that anchor wide receiver. And I'm sure that there's another name here that you're ecstatic to get if you're at the 7th spot.
Yeah, so to me, my highest overall player, Saquon Barkley, is my 4th overall player on my board right now. It's really a toss-up between him and Devontae Adams at 4 and 5. So Devontae Adams is off the board. I wouldn't have really considered Ezekiel Elliott or Derrick Henry here if Saquon was available or if Adams were available. So I'm going to go with Saquon Barkley at the 107 spot. And again, we're going to be at the mercy of the draft board here. So we see a number of running backs go off the board. I think this is pretty realistic to what's going to happen in your home leagues based on the players that are currently going. So I would say this is very realistic. If you're picking at the 107, I would pay quick attention to the players that went off the board because I think these are exactly the types of names that you're going to see fly off the board. And I'm absolutely ecstatic with this pick because my 108 is Najee Harris, and Najee Harris is available here at the 206. So I went wide receiver in the last one that we did. Like I said, we're at the mercy of the draft board here. My highest overall player is Najee Harris. So I'm going with Najee Harris there.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because my pick was coming down between Najee Harris and the guy I'm actually going to go with, Calvin Ridley. And that's funny because I was picking 1 and 10 in my home league. I know we're going to talk about the strategy video like later this week, but I was faced with a choice in the second round specifically of those two guys. So it's funny that they're always kind of linked together for me, but we'll see what happens. Again, if one of those elite tight ends goes, I'm fine with going a full 0 RB approach, but we'll see what happens. Again, I'm at the mercy of the draft board. And I got sniped on Darren Waller.
Yeah, that sucks. And the one thing I want to point out, just to emphasize it again, is the fact that you took Calvin Ridley over Clyde Edwards-Helaire, over J.K. Dobbins, over DeAndre Swift, because you view Calvin Ridley as a potential elite wide receiver in fantasy, similar to the way I view him. He's currently my wide receiver 4 in fantasy, and I have him in a tier with Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, and Stephon Diggs. I know you have Devontae Adams in a tier of his own, but I actually view those guys all in a pretty similar vein.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm on the clock here, and the biggest decision I have on the board would be DeAndre Swift versus a McLaurin or a CeeDee Lamb. Do I want to take a hero RB approach, or do I want to embrace a full 0 RB and rely upon my drafting skills, my flexibility to fix my tight end, my quarterback, and my flex spots before the running back position? This is a really tough choice, and because of the start, because I have Adams and Ridley, I think I'm going to spice it up this time and go with the DeAndre Swift again. I think he's got a lead upside. I think he can be a top 8, top 7 overall running back based on the talent, based off the receiving opportunity he has. On face value, yes, I would prefer Lamb. I would prefer Terry McLaurin. But for a structural standpoint of my team, really securing that RB1, so I'm not looking at later on Ronald Jones, guys like that, I will go with DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, and to me, actually, Swift was my highest ranked player. So it would have been, regardless of team construction, I probably would have went with DeAndre Swift there. So looking at the draft board currently, I'm in a pretty fortunate situation, I would say, because some of these elite wide receivers, in my opinion, did end up falling to me. And even though I went with 2 straight running backs to start the draft, I get a CeeDee Lamb, a Terry McLaurin, Julio Jones, Amari Cooper, Mike Evans, a number of these guys that I have very highly ranked. Looking at my rankings right now, just to make sure that I'm not messing with myself, I do have CeeDee Lamb ranked the highest, so I'm going to go with CeeDee Lamb. He's my wide receiver 10 currently, and I got him as the 12th wide receiver off the board after already starting with 2 straight running backs. So far, the 107 is being very kind to me in terms of who's falling to me in the draft. Hopefully, for those of you guys that pick at 107, it can fall to you like this as well.
Yep, absolutely. So you're going to be on the clock here, and I don't think you're going to be on the clock for too long because your boy.
It's a pretty clear choice to me. I have Julio Jones and Chris Godwin as my 2 highest rated wide receivers. It's really kind of a toss-up between if you want some more ceiling, if you want some more floor. I think Chris Godwin has the higher ceiling because I think at this point in his career, he's a little bit more explosive as a player. I think Julio Jones is guaranteed a very high target share and a very good offense, though. And Chris Godwin does have to deal with Antonio Brown, who will operate in a similar area of the field that he does. Plus, Mike Evans is going to command some targets as well. So Julio Jones is actually going to be my pick here. I really like the way I started my draft, really, because I got 2 great values at wide receiver after getting some great value at running back, too.
I'm glad you mentioned that, comparing Godwin versus Julio, because, again, those were the 2 top players on my board in this specific. Again, as much as I like Woods, Moore, Cup, that range of wide receiver, including the second-year breakout candidates, I think Chris Godwin, again, 25-year-old wide receiver, 2 years ago was a top 2 overall wide receiver. And although the ceiling may not be top 2 again this year because they added Antonio Brown, because Mike Evans is still commanding the deep portion of the field, I still think we could be looking at a 1,200, 1,300 yard wide receiver operating that secure role in this offense. So again, you know that all too well as a Buccaneers fan. From a reliability standpoint, Chris Godwin may be the most reliable wide receiver on your entire team. So I'm fine with getting him here and really complementing that Devontae Adams and Calvin Ridley ceiling with what we expect with Godwin from a target floor.
Yeah, I think people forget pretty quickly that Godwin was basically A.J. Brown before A.J. Brown was a thing. 2 years ago in 2019, when Godwin was a top 5 fantasy wide receiver, this was the guy that was breaking tackles left and right and making huge yards after catch plays and taking it to the house and making sick grabs on the goal line. So yeah, Godwin, I have no complaints getting him in the 4th round. If you guys can get him at the 3-4 turn even, I think it's a great value because this guy still has great upside in this offense. They're going to throw the ball at one of the highest clips in the NFL. And if anybody gets injured, Evans, Brown, and Godwin's able to command even more targets, then he has legitimate top 3, top 5 upside at the wide receiver position.
For sure. As much as I love Godwin, though, looking back on it, if I had taken Kyle Pitts, because I didn't think both these tight ends would go or all 3 of them would go. If I had taken Kyle Pitts and was still able to get a Brandon Ayuk here, I probably would have preferred that. But regardless, I think this team with Godwin, I add one of these guys still with Brandon Ayuk. I have the best 4-stack of wide receiver in this league, and I don't think it's particularly close.
Yeah, it probably isn't looking at the board. I have a really, I would call my approach a balanced approach, or what you called the 2 running back anchor approach that you took in the first draft. So looking at the board again, the running back position is just a complete wasteland. There's no way I would take one. Of course, James Robinson is still on the board right now, but I'm going to pretend he's not, just because I think he would be gone at this point in the draft. And I don't want to double down on just taking James Robinson. I'd imagine he'd be gone somewhere in the 3rd round. I think Dak Prescott is the direction I'm actually going to go in because I have CeeDee Lamb and because I don't see a huge discrepancy at wide receiver. There's a number of guys that I think I can get on the way back that'll be great wide receivers for me. One of them just went. Hopefully the other one can get to me. And the other one did. Perfect. Okay, so I was hoping one of T. Higgins or Chase Claypool would fall to me, and Chase Claypool did. So I'm going to go with Chase Claypool with this pick. I really, really like the way my team is shaping up. I think this is phenomenal value that I've gotten on pretty much everybody that I've drafted so far. Again, maybe the 7th pick isn't the worst thing in the world. And I actually am picking 9th in my home league. And I would be ecstatic if some of these guys were falling to me in this similar range of the draft.
The one advice I can give you guys as well, no matter where you're picking, is don't go full boomer like Team 9.
Yeah, Team 9, see what Team 9 did, and what he did is called robust RB, right? And the assumption when you go robust RB is that the running back position is scarce. The running back position gets injured a lot. So you want to load up on running backs because running backs get injured, they bust, and things of that nature. But the problem is you put yourself so behind the 8 ball at wide receiver, and in this kind of format where you can start up to 4 wide receivers, you're going to be really behind the 8 ball. And I know the wide receiver position is deep, but it's not actually that deep. The high-end talent is deep. From rounds 3 to 7 is deep. But once you get outside of round 7, you're starting guys like Nelson Aguilar in the 9th round. Like, it's not actually that deep of a position. There's just a lot of wide receiver 2s.
For sure. And if we're looking at it right now, let's just say Adams and Ridley versus Taylor and Gibson is a wash. Let's just say hypothetically. My 3-stack of DeAndre Swift, Chris Godwin, and Brandon Ayuk is going to absolutely annihilate his 3-stack of Miles Sanders, Josh Jacobs, and Adam Thielen. So you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball to quote unquote scoop value at a scarce position. Going full robust RB like this is a floor play. It is completely a floor play because you're understanding the fragility of the running back position and you want to cover yourself in case you lose one of your top guys. Well, if you're already going into your draft thinking, oh, what if I miss my top guy for a couple weeks? You're losing the battle. Because at the end of the day here, me and Corey were talking about it before the show. Your goal, if you do not have the 101, your goal from your draft slot should be figuring out how exactly can I construct a team that can take down the CMC team. Because CMC, to me, is such a tier above every other fantasy football asset this year that you have to construct your team and being able to combat that. So from my perspective, adding in Adams and a Ridley gives me a significant competitive edge at the wide receiver position compared to the CMC team. Now, quote unquote, Derrick Henry went at 1 here. You're not going to see that often, but let's just say that was Christian McCaffrey at 1. Christian McCaffrey, Mahomes, Justin Jefferson versus Adams, Ridley, and Swift. that's going to be a competitive battle. I would probably still lean the CMC team. But what I was able to do for the rest of my picks with Godwin, AIYUK, and most likely a wide receiver pick here is going to be able to close the distance. And if I can just hit on the ceiling of some of these breakout wide receivers, I believe I can, from a constructed structural standpoint, be able to compete with the CMC team.
For sure. Yeah, I don't disagree there. So who are you looking at on the board right now?
It's Jerry Jeudy, and it's not really close.
Yeah, I again, like I said, James Robinson, we're just going to pretend he was long gone. Yeah. Obviously, that would probably be the direction you would go if James Robinson was, in fact, available on the board, but we're going to give some time for ADP to catch up to itself. So you're back on the clock again. We see a number of bad running backs go off the board after you made your pick, and the RB dead zone, man, like people are going to do this in your home league, and probably even to a greater degree than our draft board currently shows. Guys like Ronald Jones, guys like Melvin Gordon, Raheem Mostert, these guys are going to be gone by the 7th round because people are that thirsty for running backs in your home leagues. So by doing what Danny's doing currently, where you go hero RB or you get an anchor running back and you just scoop up that value at wide receiver, quarterback, or tight end, then you're going to be ahead of a lot of the people in those mid rounds because they're going to be taking bad running backs like Josh Jacobs and Darrell Henderson and Mike Davis and things of that nature.
For sure. And I'm actually looking at here, and those bad running backs went off the board, but you mentioned Damian Harris in your last draft. I think he's a clear cut, him and Sermon above the rest of the position. Listen, we're recording this after the Sony Michel news. I do think that Damian Harris could be a 20 touch per game back. And in the mid 7th round, to complement what I have with DeAndre Swift and my wide receiver core, I'm fine with making that quote unquote dead zone pick because I don't necessarily view Damian Harris as the prototypical dead zone running back.
Plus, I think the important thing to note as well is that the wide receiver position has dried up significantly in relation to the running back position because if Jerry Jeudy, Chase Claypool, Brandon AIYUK are on the board, you're not taking Damian Harris or a running back at all for that matter. Right. It's because you're deciding between Damian Harris and Cortland Sutton and DJ Chark and Deebo Samuel, and that's kind of what we're talking about. We just really want to be skipping the middle tier of running backs, the Gaskins, the Hunts, the Miles Sanders, Darrell Henderson, Mike Davis. Like that's the tier that we're skipping. We're skipping from once DeAndre Swift pretty much is off the board, James Robinson and David Montgomery. Once those guys are off the board for me, then I'm looking to wide receivers, and I'm not looking again at running backs until Damian Harris, Trey Sermon, Michael Carter are the best values on the board kind of thing.
Yep, absolutely. And from a structural standpoint, again, we kind of both have the same layout, except you got that elite quarterback in there. Again, someone I also would have heavily considered at the 506. I just couldn't pass on the AIYUK. But yeah, overall, I like how both of our teams have constructed. And I know we talked a lot of slander about the 5 to 8 spots, but if value falls to you the way it's done for us, you can make a heck of a team at these spots. It's just being the fact that we've drafted with a lot of sharper drafters recently, where we've kind of grown accustomed to the value not being able to fall.
Exactly. Yeah. So prepare for the worst and hope for the best. That's the slogan you want to be if you're picking 5 to 8. And I don't want to completely take the same players that we took in our last draft, but to me, Devontae Smith is a clear tier breakout wide receiver. Yeah. I have him ranked right around the range that I have Jerry Jeudy ranked, which you got like 11 picks before. So I was kind of hoping that Noah Fant would fall back to me because I do have him a tier above the rest of the tight ends that were on the board. And Robert Tonyan actually went off the board too. So I'm probably going to punt tight end at this point in the draft, go for a Rob Gronkowski, Cole Kmet type of build in the 11th to 15th round. Because I just personally don't view that big of a tier break between a guy like Tyler Higbee and Rob Gronkowski. Like to me, it doesn't seem like that big of a tier break. So I'd probably punt that position. I'm looking back at running back and wide receiver. I already have Dak Prescott, so I'm good at quarterback. Michael Carter to me represents a pretty clear tier break at running back. And I'm sorry to you because you were probably going to pick him if I didn't. He's my 3rd running back on this team. I kind of faded the running back position from rounds 3 to 7, like you always want to do in the running back dead zone. I got my 2 anchor running backs, and I got some upside in Michael Carter, who could eventually turn into a solid flex option for me.
Yeah, no, I fully agree there. That was a very fine selection. I've been very adamant that I think Michael Carter's the clear-cut most talented player in that backfield. Listen, Tevin Coleman's absolute dust. A lot of micro-analysis here, but Michael Carter's a good pick at that spot. For me, the way I would look at this is typically someone's going to see the team and say, oh my God, well, you got to go quarterback, you got to go tight end. You don't have either of those positions. Well, if you actually look at the draft board around me, I am the only team that has not filled out those positions. So I'm the only team aside from you from the tight end position that has not filled out those positions. Quarterbacks all filled out except for me. Tight ends, me and you're the only ones that don't have a tight end on board. And when I'm looking at the quarterback position, yes, Ryan Tannehill is my clear-cut top option. But this is a situation where I want to be. Listen, people push the top end quarterback so far up the board that I can get value on a Ryan Tannehill. I can wait on him because if one of these teams decide to just say, oh, I'm going to go 2 quarterbacks, they're already doing themselves a disservice. So at this point, there's still really good value at the wide receiver position. And someone might be watching this saying, oh, how are you going to go 6 wide receivers in the first 8 picks? Well, when Robbie Anderson falls to you, you take him in the 8th round. So I misclicked there, but Robbie Anderson, 8th round pick. Now I have the most stacked wide receiver core you could possibly construct at the 6th slot.
And again, you're going to be able to play matchups with your wide receivers. Maybe someone busts, maybe somebody gets injured. And at the same time, you should have a good trade chip. Let's say Jerry Jeudy is just popping off at the beginning of the season, right? Like he's just going ham bone. But you're like, Jerry Judy's my 5th receiver because the rest of your guys are going ham bone on your team. You could go Jerry Jeudy. I'll trade Jerry Jeudy away to the James Robinson owner or something. I'll trade Jerry Jeudy away to the person that has J.K. Dobbins or DeAndre Swift. And you could get a huge value jump up in from wide receiver to running back just because you picked the best player available. You didn't reach on Ronald Jones or Raheem Mostert at your pick. You picked the best player on the board, which was Jerry Jeudy. So that's basically what you want to do. Obviously, we went with kind of differing approaches all across the board from 5, 6, 7, and 8. We had a couple 2 running back starts, a couple 0 RBs, a couple hero RBs. So that's kind of the way that we see it. I think I really like the way my team turned out. But again, this is a really big time value team that I got because I don't think you're going to get Najee Harris at the 2-6. I don't think you're going to get Saquon Barkley at the 1-7. I don't think you're going to get CeeDee Lamb at the 3-7. Julio Jones at the 4-6. I don't know. Like Dak Prescott 5-7 might be okay, but
Claypool 6-6.
Yeah, like to me, this is just a phenomenal team. So if you're able to walk away with any kind of team from the 7 spot, similar to the way that my team looks, I would say that you're doing a great job.
And honestly, like while the casual person might be watching this video saying, oh, how can you only take 2 running backs in the first 8 rounds? I got value every single other pick. Like Devontae Adams, my 5th overall player, I'm got him at the 6th. I'm happy with that. Calvin Ridley is my 13th overall player, falling to me at the back/mid 2nd round. DeAndre Swift, again, so right around that value for me. I know you have him a bit higher.
I have him 21, so he'd be relatively actually at value if you would have picked him in the 2nd round.
Yep. So I fully agree there. And then those 3 wide receivers in the mid rounds, Godwin, AIYUK, Jeudy. Godwin should be an early 4th, late 3rd round pick. Brandon AIYUK should be a late 4th round pick at minimum. And Jerry Jeudy should be a 5th round pick. Got at least a round of value on basically all of those guys. Damon Harris is probably about where he's going to be. And then Robbie Anderson. This is a guy that's going 6th, 7th round in most drafts, and I got him at the 8th here, so I'm very stoked at that. I think looking at this team, I legitimately have 6 top 30 overall wide receivers.
Yep, definitely possible. And I have every wide receiver that you have on your team outside of Robbie Anderson inside of my top 25, and Robbie Anderson's like 28. So yeah, they're all really close. So if you guys did enjoy this video, of course, like, comment, subscribe, comment any of your thoughts down below. Again, try to keep the comments not, why are you going 0 RB? Try and understand why we went with a certain thing. Again, the reason we drafted the way we drafted, because we picked the best player on the board. We can always make trades. We can always add depth later in the draft. We can always pick up waiver wire pieces. And there is no more replaceable position in fantasy football than a running back too, because you can get Salvin Ahmeds, you can get J.D. McKissick, you can get Myles Gaskins, you can get Nyheim Hines, you can get James Robinson, even if you get lucky, on the waiver wire before the season, during the season, midway through the season, or at the end of the season. And you can start freaking Elijah McGuire in your championship round and get a good game out of it. So that's why we didn't go super heavy on running backs. I know this is going to be different from what you're used to seeing in terms of the fantasy content on YouTube. But if you did enjoy, like, comment, subscribe. If you want to support us in any way, if you want access to our rankings, we made a lot of reference to them in this video. You can go to underdogfantasy.com. You can deposit $10 on Underdog Fantasy. And by depositing $10, you'll get $25 on top of whatever you deposit bonus. And you'll also get both of our draft guides as a thank you for free. You'll get all of our redraft rankings, half PPR, PPR, Superflex, whatever. You'll get our dynasty rankings, dynasty, 1 quarterback, half PPR, whatever you need there. You'll get our sleepers, our busts, our breakouts. Everything that you could need is in our draft guide, and all you have to do is deposit on Underdog Fantasy using promo code FSE with a minimum $10 deposit. So peace out, guys, and enjoy your Wednesday.
Why you need the money?